The phone vibrated against the cool granite counter. Paige's name flashed on the screen. I swiped to answer, bringing the receiver to my ear. Hysterical sobs immediately blasted through the speaker. Echoing in the quiet room, she choked on her own breath, her voice trembling with perfect, theatrical grief. Our mother died last night from a sudden infection. She cried. The funeral was Friday. She took a ragged, heavy breath, laying the tragedy on thick. She claimed Mom left the historic Charleston estate entirely to her, that everything was going to her, and coldly warned me not to even bother flying down. I was not wanted. I pulled the phone away from my ear. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. Across the kitchen island, my mother, Deanna, sat perfectly upright on a velvet bar stool. She took a slow, calm sip of her morning chamomile tea, looking very much alive. Paige thought she had buried our mother alive. But she forgot I do not abandon my blood. Just 3 weeks earlier, a sinking suspicion had driven me to drive 4 hours out of state. Paige had supposedly moved Mom into a premier assisted living community. The address she finally gave me belonged to a terrifying state-funded facility on the edge of a crumbling industrial park. The stench of ammonia and neglected decay hit me the second I walked through the double doors. I found my mother sitting in a stained armchair in the corner of a dim, crowded room, her eyes blank from heavy. Unnecessary sedatives. Paige had dumped her there and cut all communication. She instructed the staff to restrict visitors, claiming Mom was entirely incapacitated. Paige and her husband, Trevor, viewed the woman who raised us not as a human being, but as a squatter in their future luxury estate. They wanted the Charleston house for their social rebrand. And a living, breathing mother was simply too expensive and too inconvenient to keep around. I packed Mom's bags that very night. We vanished into the shadows, leaving no forwarding address. I spent the next 3 weeks detoxing her from the sedatives, hiring private specialists, and watching the light finally return to her eyes. Paige's fake tears on the phone were just the opening act of a massive sociopathic con. Friday morning arrived, wrapped in the thick, humid air of a South Carolina summer. We parked down the street from the most lavish church in the historic district. Paige was hosting a memorial service fit for a head of state. We slipped through the heavy oak doors and stood in the shadows of the vestibule. The stained glass windows cast colorful, fractured light across the crowded pews. Paige stood at the pulpit, draped in a black designer dress, a sheer veil pinned to her hair. She dabbed her dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, spinning a tragic tale of a sudden, highly infectious disease that required an immediate closed casket cremation. Then came the pitch. She directed the grieving congregation to a memorial fund, a GoFundMe with a goal of $100,000, entirely meant to cover the devastating medical debts and estate taxes. She was milking the community's sympathy to fuel her luxury debt. I stepped out of the shadows and walked straight down the center aisle. The murmurs started instantly. Heads turned. Whispers hissed through the pews. Paige stopped speaking. Her eyes locked onto mine, and the fake grief vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine rage. She gripped the edges of the wooden pulpit, leaning into the microphone to publicly shame me. She called me the prodigal daughter, the sister who abandoned their sick mother in her time of need, daring to show my face only when the inheritance was on the line. I stopped at the front row. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply turned and gestured toward the back of the sanctuary. The heavy oak doors swung wide open. Diana stepped into the light. She wore a pristine, tailored white suit. She held her head high, her posture radiating absolute authority. The organist missed a key, sending a harsh, discordant note echoing into the rafters. The silence that followed was absolute. The environment faded away. The only thing that mattered was the look on my sister's face. Paige's jaw unhinged. The color drained from her skin, leaving her looking like a hollow porcelain doll. Trevor, sitting in the front pew, went entirely rigid, his eyes darting toward the side exits. The shock in the room shattered into chaos. Congregants jumped to their feet. Deacons shouted in confusion. Diana walked straight up to the altar, took the microphone from Paige's trembling hand, and demanded every single dime of the memorial fund be returned immediately. Paige's social reputation vaporized in a matter of seconds. The community she tried to bleed dry was now staring at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. Despite the catastrophic public humiliation, Paige doubled down in the vestibule, surrounded by furious church elders. She pulled a stack of papers from her designer bag. She waved a set of medical documents in my face, screaming that Diana had severe dementia, that I had kidnapped a vulnerable adult, and that she was calling the police. She thought a piece of paper made her invincible. She forgot I am a senior title escrow officer. I deal with predatory real estate fraud every single day of my life. I knew exactly what she was hiding. One look at the county property records the night before had laid her entire criminal blueprint bare. Paige had not just faked a death for GoFundMe cash. She had used a forged durable power of attorney to secretly take out a $900,000 reverse mortgage on the family estate. I did not waste my breath arguing with a narcissist in a church lobby. I let her scream. The very next morning, Diane and I walked straight into a judge's chambers. We presented the verified, time-stamped cognitive evaluations from the top neurologist in the state, completely disproving the dementia claim. The judge looked at the forged power of attorney, looked at the vibrant, articulate woman sitting in front of him, and immediately slammed his gavel. He legally nullified the power of attorney. That single stroke of a pen turned Paige's massive reverse mortgage from a binding contract into a federal financial crime. Diana was instantly restored as the sole, undisputed owner of the property. Following protocol, I placed a strict automated fraud alert lock on the property's title and insurance records. Paige thought she was going home to a mansion she owned. She had no idea she was walking into a trap built entirely by her own arrogance. Tuesday morning, Paige and Trevor were hiding out behind the locked doors of the Charleston estate, their bank accounts frozen by the lender's fraud department. Dodging relentless phone calls from furious donors, a heavy, rhythmic pounding echoed through the house. It was not the police coming to arrest me for kidnapping. It was the county sheriff's deputies, accompanied by a professional eviction crew. Because the judge voided the power of attorney, Paige and Trevor were no longer defaulted borrowers facing a months-long foreclosure process. They were hostile trespassers illegally occupying Diana's property. The deputies breached the door with a writ of ejectment. Paige completely shattered. She shrieked, kicking and clawing as the movers hauled her expensive furniture out the front door. Her designer dresses, her luxury bags, and Trevor's extensive collection of imported sneakers were unceremoniously dumped onto the humid Charleston curb in broad daylight. Trevor did what parasites always do when the host dies. He calculated his odds. He looked at the frozen bank accounts, the pending wire fraud charges, and the absolute ruin surrounding his wife. He grabbed a single duffel bag stuffed with his remaining luxury watches, sprinted down the back alleyway, and jumped into a waiting rideshare car. He abandoned Paige to face the humiliation entirely alone. She sat on the curb amidst the wreckage of her life, her makeup smeared. Watching the neighbors she had lied to film her eviction on their phones, I stood on the porch, looking down at the woman who tried to erase our mother. I reminded her that if she had not been so incredibly greedy, if she had not signed a predatory reverse mortgage with a strict occupancy clause while dumping Mom in a facility, the bank would never have flagged the fraud. Her own signature was the weapon that destroyed her. We spent the rest of the week cleaning the house, scrubbing away the toxic residue they left behind. The heavy silence of the historic home finally felt peaceful. But late Thursday evening, my phone buzzed with an urgent automated alert. A new, highly inflated property and renter's insurance binder had just been bound to the address under Paige's name. She had initiated the policy days prior using the fake power of attorney, and it was scheduled to go into effect at midnight. Paige was not just angry about the eviction. She was desperate. She owed massive debts to Trevor's shady business partners, and with the house gone, she had absolutely no way to pay them back. Burning the historic estate to the ground to claim the accidental fire payout was her final, calculated survival tactic. I did not call the police immediately. I hired a private, armed security contractor to park in an unmarked car across the street. At 2 a.m, a shadow slipped through the wrought iron gate. Paige crept across the manicured lawn, a heavy red gasoline canister swinging from her hand. Before she could even unscrew the cap, blinding floodlights illuminated the yard. The security guard stepped out of the darkness, drawing his weapon, and detained her on the grass. When the police cruisers swarmed the property moments later, I walked down the steps and handed the lead detective the printed insurance binder. Paige was not just arrested for trespassing. She was taken into custody for federal wire fraud and premeditated arson. Trevor never even made it out of the state. He was apprehended at the International Airport Terminal. The furious church deacons had flooded the authorities with mass wire fraud reports over the GoFundMe scam, flagging his passport. Facing decades in federal prison, Trevor instantly folded. He flipped on his wife to secure a plea deal, handing the authorities the entire paper trail of the forged reverse mortgage. His cowardice sealed her fate on the financial crimes, making the arson charge the final, inescapable nail in her coffin. The heavy metal doors of the county jail slammed shut on both of them, and Diana and I finally locked the front door of our home, entirely safe. The judge showed absolutely no mercy. At the sentencing hearing, he handed Paige 8 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole only after serving 6. The court ordered complete restitution of the stolen funds. The community completely turned their backs on her. Her socialite friends vanished. Her reputation evaporated. And her name became a cautionary tale whispered in the pews of the church she tried to exploit. Months passed. The humid summer gave way to a crisp, cool autumn. I was sitting on the wraparound porch, a glass of sweet tea in my hand, watching the leaves drift across the lawn. The mail carrier dropped a stack of envelopes on the table. Buried near the bottom was a plain white envelope stamped with the seal of the state correctional facility. The handwriting was unmistakably Paige's. I opened it. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She wrote about how much she suffered in a concrete cell. She reminded me that we were sisters, that we shared the same blood, and that our mother would want us to reconcile. She claimed she only took the money because she was under intense financial pressure, that she did it to save the family image. She ended the letter by asking me to put $500 into her commissary account. My chest did not ache. My hands did not shake. I read the words, folded the paper perfectly in half, and dropped it straight into the recycling bin. I did not write back. I did not call the warden to block her mail. I simply went back to my tea. Her words held absolutely no power over me anymore. The house is full of life now. Diana hosts a weekly book club in the front parlor. The laughter of the neighbors echoes through the hallways. I surround myself with friends who show up when times are hard, colleagues who respect my boundaries, and a mother who looks at me with pure pride. This is my chosen family. They do not demand my loyalty through guilt. They earn it through mutual respect. The chaos of the past feels like a distant, fading nightmare. The air in the house is lighter. The mornings are quieter. And my sleep is entirely unbroken. We are taught from a very young age that family is a sacred bond, an unbreakable contract signed at birth. We are conditioned to believe that sharing a last name or a bloodline means you must endure whatever pain they inflict upon you. We excuse the manipulation. We justify the disrespect. We shrink ourselves down to keep the peace, convincing ourselves that if we just love them a little harder, they will eventually treat us right. But toxic people do not change when you love them harder. They only change their tactics. They view your kindness as a weakness, a soft spot to be exploited whenever they need a stepping stone. When you strip away the societal expectations, you realize a hard truth. Blood does not mandate loyalty, actions do. The biological lottery you were born into is not a free pass for continuous abuse. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, safety, and unwavering support. If someone requires you to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm, they are not your family. They are a liability. Narcissists are entirely blinded by their own entitlement. They believe they are the smartest person in the room, untouchable and exempt from the consequences of their own actions. But this arrogance is their greatest vulnerability. They will always build their own traps. If you step back, if you remove your emotional reaction and observe their behavior legally and logically, you will see them handing you the very tools required for their destruction. You do not need to seek vengeance. You only need to let their own lives collapse under their own crushing weight. The ultimate revenge against a toxic family member is not seeing them in handcuffs or watching them lose their home. Those things are justice, but they do not bring lasting peace. The ultimate revenge is absolute, unyielding boundaries. It is the realization that you no longer have to catch them when they fall. It is removing their access to your energy, your resources, and your emotions. When you stop playing their game, they lose all their power over you. I am Morgan, and I am finally free. If you have someone in your life who uses the title of family to excuse behavior you would never tolerate from a stranger, ask yourself what it is costing you to keep them around. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your peace. You owe them absolutely nothing. Thank you for listening to my story. Share this with someone who needs the courage to set their own boundaries. Subscribe for more stories of surviving the unimaginable. And never let anyone make you feel guilty for demanding the respect you deserve. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why did Morgan wait weeks after finding her mother in that horrific facility to finally bring the hammer down? Why didn't she just call the police on day one and have them all arrested? Let us talk about the psychology of toxic families. When you grow up dealing with a narcissist like Paige, you are battling the slot machine effect. In psychology, this is called intermittent reinforcement. You do not get abused 100% of the time. Every now and then, they hand you a crumb of hope, a normal holiday dinner, a momentary truce, a fake smile, and just like a gambler at a casino, you become addicted to pulling the lever, hoping that this time they will actually act like real family. Morgan did not delay because she was weak. She waited because cutting the cord completely goes against every survival instinct you were taught as a child. She had to detox her mother and herself before she could go to war. Now, let us look at the street smart financial defense here. Because this story is an absolute masterclass in dismantling smart crime by doing one simple thing, following the money, scammers like Paige rely entirely on emotion, panic, and social pressure. Morgan stripped all of that away and used 3 specific strategies you can apply to your own life. First is the audit strategy. Instead of arguing in the church lobby about who was a better daughter, Morgan went straight to the county property records. Liars absolutely hate paper trails. When someone in your life is making wild claims or demanding money, do not argue with them. Audit them. Check the deeds, the titles, the bank statements. The truth is always in the math. Second is the legal checkmate. Notice that Morgan did not engage in a screaming match to get the house back. She took the real medical records straight to a judge to void the forged power of attorney. She let the legal system turn a messy family dispute into a cut-and-dry case of federal wire fraud. Do not try to out-manipulate a manipulator. Just hand their lies over to the law. And finally, building the case. Morgan knew the eviction was not the end of the war. By putting a fraud alert on the insurance and hiring armed security, she anticipated the retaliation. She didn't use magic hacking or movie tricks. She used basic institutional safeguards to trap a desperate arsonist in real time. Months later, the Charleston estate no longer felt like a crime scene dressed in antiques. It felt like a home again. Every morning, Diana opened the tall windows in the front parlor and let the sea air move through the house. She planted fresh herbs in the courtyard, hosted neighbors for tea, and laughed with a fullness I had not heard since childhood. The woman, Paige, had tried to bury beneath sedatives, forged documents. And fake grief was alive in every sense of the word. As for Paige, her letters kept coming at first. Each one sounded less like remorse and more like negotiation. She blamed Trevor. She blamed debt. She blamed pressure, childhood, marriage, panic, everything except the greed that made her declare our mother dead while Diana was still breathing. I stopped opening them after the third one. Some voices do not deserve a doorway back into your life. Trevor took his deal and disappeared into the same system he thought he could outrun. Paige lost the mansion, the money, the husband, the church pews, and the social circle she had worshipped. But the greatest punishment was simpler than prison. She had to live with the truth that she destroyed herself trying to steal a life that was never hers. And me, I stopped mistaking blood for loyalty. For years, I believed family meant forgiveness without limit. I thought walking away made me cruel. But standing on that porch, watching my mother read peacefully in the sunlight, I finally understood love without protection is only a word. Family is not the person who shares your name. Family is the person who shows up when no one is watching, tells the truth when lies would be easier, and never asks you to sacrifice your safety to preserve their image. Paige called me heartless. Maybe she was right. Maybe the heart I had before was too soft for people who only knew how to take from it. So I built a stronger one. Not colder, not crueler, just guarded enough to survive. My name is Morgan. My sister tried to erase our mother, steal our home, and burn what she could not keep. But she failed. Diana is alive. The house still stands. And this time, every door is locked from the inside. Here is the final verdict. Blood does not give anyone a license to steal your future, your assets, or your peace of mind. Protecting your boundaries with cold Hard facts is not a betrayal, it is survival. You cannot negotiate with entitlement, but you can definitely evict it. Have you ever had to use a paper trail to expose a toxic family member? Drop your story in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe for more real-life strategies on protecting your peace and your wallet.